Minister Guilbeault, what do you make of Trump's win yesterday? How are you going to deal with a U.S. president that's combative on environmental issues? He's going to roll back a lot of advancements the Biden administration made.
Well, first, Canada and the U.S. have a long history of collaboration on a number of different issues. Number one. Number two, what I would say, and I said that to some of your colleagues this morning, if you look at, for example, the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, some people are saying, oh, he's going to cut that. Actually, the vast majority of those investments are in Republican states. Billions of dollars being invested in Republican states. Thousands of jobs being created in Republican states. So you'll have Republican governors, senators, members of Congress who'll say, well, hold on a second, this is good for us. This is good for our economy. This is good for jobs. More and more, the issue of the environment, and specifically climate change in the United States and around the world, is viewed in the eyes of a security issue. How do you get access to certain critical components, critical minerals? The U.S. Department of Defense is investing in Canada because they want to reduce their dependencies on China for many of these components. We will be a partner of choice for the United States, as we are for other of our like-minded allies around the world.
You do sound very optimistic here. This is a president that said, drill, baby, drill.
I'm not saying there won't be challenges, and let's see what the agenda of the president will be, but I'm saying we've worked with them in the past. We've worked with the Republican administration in the past. We've worked with the Democratic administration in the past. We can do this.
But
I have one last question.
Are you going to rethink the oil and gas emissions capital, given the fact that we have now a president-elect that says drill, baby, drill, and Canada's oil and gas industry is going to be looking at that quite closely?
No, I mean, Canada is independent from the United States, and we adopt our own laws and regulations.
Sure, but will that not make it now less competitive for businesses to do business in Canada compared to the U.S. that says drill, baby, drill?
We have put in place draft regulations to cap the pollution of the oil and gas sector, which shows that they can increase their production by 16% by 2030 while reducing pollution by 35%.
But if there's no such cap in the United States...
The U.S. doesn't have carbon pricing. We have carbon pricing. We have different. There are many different things that we do differently between the U.S. and Canada. We're not a carbon copy of the United States, and we won't be. Thank you.
Minister Ien, can we talk to you about the U.S. election and what that means for women's rights?
Well, we were prepared for either outcome, and that's why we've been so vigilant with regards to women's rights. And you will have noticed that last week, within a Ways and Means motion, I tabled legislation on pregnancy crisis centers, and it's to make sure that they're doing the right thing and making sure that they let Canadian women know exactly what they're offering and not offering, or they risk losing their charitable status. This is something that we're vigilant about. So we'll keep watch. We'll keep doing what we do, but we were prepared for either outcome. We've been working really hard.
When there's a loss of women's rights over the border, what is the impact here in Canada from your perspective?
Well, we know that there are women that try to come to this country when that happens. There are border cities. We see numbers going up. And so this is why it's so important. You know, it's I sometimes think about the questions that I get, and people will say, well, women have, freedom of choice here. Women have all these things. Why do you even think this is important? And I say, well, the women over there thought they had that freedom too. And so we should never, ever be asleep at the switch. We should always be vigilant.
And are you doing anything to prepare for those women starting to come over the border? I mean, are you...
We're always preparing, and we're always looking at various scenarios. But as I said, we've prepared for either outcome, and we have for a long time.
Why do you
think
think reproductive rights is a priority for Canadian women over the cost of living? America just had a chance to elect Democrats on the issue of reproductive rights, and they chose not to.
I think there was a lot there. It wasn't just about reproductive rights in the States. Why do you think the
Democrats lost when they made that such a central part of their campaign and they targeted women?
They did really, really well in the midterms when they did. I just think times are tough, and when times are tough and prices are high, that kitchen table issues are important, and they become more important. People are having a hard time feeding their families, and that's the number one issue. They're talking about crime and safety of their family and friends and neighborhoods. That's an issue. It's not just one thing, it's several things. There's several factors.
What do you think the Trump presidency is going to, this is a big question for the world, for the conflicts we see, and for how Canada wants to see them resolved?
Well, the American people have spoken. I mean, I think from our Canadian perspective, we'll be respectful of that. but we'll also look at what this means for Canada. Obviously, we have to stand up for Canadians. We have to stand up for Canadian issues and values. But we have to work together. So this is going to be an interesting thing, and I think that extends beyond our borders of Canada and the U.S. as well. We work well with Americans around the world. I mean, I travel a lot in foreign affairs. I travel. The world counts on the Americans to be, whether it's about security, whether it's about international aid and development. So we will be working with them and finding a way to do this. We've been there before. We show that we can get good value for Canadians in our relationships with the Americans, and we'll continue to do that. I think the Prime Minister's ready, and I think he'll do it well.
Are you concerned what it means for a country like Ukraine? I mean, Trump was in before, you're correct, but there was not a war in the Middle East, there was not a war in Ukraine, and Mr. Trump has some pretty strong opinions on how he wants those to end.
I know where we stand on Ukraine, that we'll stand for an independent, sovereign Ukraine with territorial integrity, and we will speak with our G7 partners about that all the time. We'll stand united, and we'll stand with the people of Ukraine and making sure that they have what they need to defend themselves.
As a Liberal, I was going to say, as a Liberal, do you have any takeaways yet from what happened in the United States? I mean, American context, the American context, Canadian, but some of the concerns that Americans went to the polls are shared here in Canada. So as a Liberal, as an member of an incumbent government, any takeaways from last night?
I think we have to listen all the time. I'm listening to my voters in Don Valley West, the residents of Don Valley West. I grew up in a border town in Sault Ste. Marie where we related every day with the Americans, and there are differences and there are similarities. I went to school in Chicago. I have a sense of what Americans' values and priorities are. We have many similarities, and we share a continent. We're going to have to get along. But also I know that Canadians are worried about jobs and prosperity. They're worried about cost of living. So we'll listen to them.
There's going to be a transition team put in place very, very soon now. Do you or the minister have any intentions of traveling to the U.S. In the coming days, weeks?
We travel to the U.S. all the time. I haven't heard any yet, but of course we'll be. We have relationships with governors in states across the mainland, as well as Alaska and Hawaii. We have relationships with Congress, both in the Senate and the House of Representatives, and we have relationships in the White House and with NGOs and everybody. So we'll foster those relationships. We showed a Team Canada approach, worked the last time to ensure Canada got the best benefits we need. This is an important trading partner, and we'll be there.
You're thinking Canada Conservatives will be part of that Team Canada approach?
Absolutely, I hope that the Conservatives recognize this is way beyond partisan politics. All of us need to stand up for Canada's defence, Canada's security, and I would just take a moment to remind Canadians that Pierre Poilievre should get a security clearance so he can be part of every conversation.
Learned from last night's showing for the Liberals?
In what sense?
Well, you saw Democrats lose. I mean, there's questions about did they connect with the working class? I mean, Liberals have a lot in common with the Democrats. Do you take any lessons from what you saw last night?
That's a bit of a comparison of apples and oranges, I think. I mean, certainly there would be some more shared values between the parties, but I think to try to take the American context and apply it to the Canadian or vice versa does a little bit of a disservice to the types of things that we need to be focusing on here. So certainly it was interesting to watch, and there may be some takeaways for us that can be applied to the domestic situation here, but I think we have to be careful about making broad comparisons between the American and Canadian context.
Are there any takeaways that stick out to you?
Well, I mean, you've been covering politics I got something in my hair,
yeah.
There we go. Covering politics for a little while. I mean, you don't come to a conclusion on an analysis within 12 hours of a result. You have to take some time to reflect, and right now we're focused on what's happening here. Obviously, the election, regardless of whether it's a Republican or a Democrat president, impacts the work that we have to do because the nature of the relationship will change with a new administration. So we have to focus on those things. In terms of the political lessons, whether there are any there, that's something that can take place over time, and you really have to make sure to do a thorough analysis, and I'm sure that campaign folks will be taking that time that's necessary to see whether there are some things that we can draw.
Are you concerned about what a Trump presidency might mean for jobs, for your constituency, for... the economy in Canada?
The job of the Canadian government is always to look out for the best interests of the Canadian people. So we've been through a Trump administration before, and we've also been through other American administrations where there's been a bit of a growing isolationist sentiment. This is something that both major political parties in the United States were espousing. So there's going to be a necessity for us to evaluate the different policies that they put forward. But, that will take some time. And of course, until the new president is sworn in during inauguration in a couple of months from now, there'll be a bit of a transition period where I think we get a sense of the direction that they're headed, and then we will have to adjust accordingly. But ultimately, the Prime Minister is very well positioned, I think, to be able to work with the new administration because he's been there before. A lot of the relationships still exist. A lot of the understanding of what matters to Americans and what matters to Canadians will be tapped into, I think, more easily than perhaps they would otherwise be.
Thanks,
All right?
Ben.
Okay, thanks.
Are you concerned about what a Trump presidency means for the war in Gaza?
Canada has a strong relationship with U.S. and it's really very important that we work with the new administration to make sure that we fight for Canadians. And the situation in, I think, a lot of innocent people have been killed, and it is on the mind of a lot of my constituents, and I will keep on advocating for the Palestinian people, Lebanese people, everyone.
Hard to know. I think it'll see in the fullness of time. You got to expect you got to respect the decision of the American people. There'll be repercussions in Canada. I think we're well positioned to deal with them. But there's no clear answers. I think that will become clear in the fullness of time, and I'm a long way from the circle in which those decisions are made.
And from the strategic point of view for the Liberals, to see that the Americans had that desire of change in their country, and to hear some Canadians asking for change here, what lessons can be taken?
I don't know. I really don't. I mean, you ask 10 people, you get 20 opinions. I think we just have to take it a day at a time and stay focused on the things that matter. I don't have a clear sense of how this is going to impact. There's lots of challenges in this country as there are there, and it's a tough read. I've thought about it a lot, and I wish I had a clear answer for you, but I don't have one.
It was just yesterday,
yeah. No, but I thought about it before too. What will the impact be? And I couldn't predict what it will be, and it's no clearer today.
Do you think the Prime Minister is able to handle a second Trump presidency?
Oh God,
Do you trust
yes.
him?
Oh yes. He's been there, done that. He clearly knows what we're in for, and has already started the groundwork to be able to deal with it. And I mean, I can't imagine if Pierre Poilievre was in his seat how bad it would be. I think the experience that he had in Trump 1.0 is going to serve us all well.
Is this an opportunity for Mr. Trudeau to maybe talk to people like constituents of yours who say maybe it's time to go, that he can show them maybe he still has some fight left in him? Maybe is this an opportunity for the Prime Minister, you think?
Absolutely.
And seeing that the Democrats change their leader and they couldn't get reelected, is that I don't know. Is that not a good sign for the Liberals?
I'll leave that to the pundits. Okay. The same answer. I don't know. I couldn't even speculate.
You said absolutely to the question of this isn't. What can Mr. Trudeau do right now? What can he do to show the constituents that he still got it if this is an opportunity?
That'll be up to the constituents to assess his actions. I can't foretell the future on that, but every big challenge that comes before the country that he faces is another opportunity for him. This one will be no different.
Are you saying that because you feel that Mr. Trudeau likes to fight, like to have a clear
I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Care.
What do you make of the results of yesterday that we've seen in the U.S.?
So I don't know if there's much for me to make of it. That's the situation, and now we as Canadians have a job to do. As a government, we've been there before, and representing a community close to the border. I know we work well with the United States, and regardless of who the president is, we'll continue to do that.
You have talked a lot about disinformation, misinformation. What do you make of this reality in the States? And do you think it had played a role in that election?
Well, I'll speak to it in regards to Canada, because that's what I'm accustomed to, that it is a reality in our electoral system, and that we're seeing it not only from political parties in this country, but foreign actors as well. It's having an impact here that's well reported on. It's something that we have to keep an eye on and keep working on in terms of regulating of big tech giants. So thank you.
Thank you. From your constituents about Trump's presidency.
I haven't chatted with any of my constituents today about what happened, but this is democracy, right? People get to choose who runs their provinces and their countries and their territories and their nations, and might be challenging for some of us who disagree with certain policies, but this is democracy and we respect it.
Any lesson that you take away as being a Liberal to see what happened in terms of Donald Trump being reelected? Canada's not the U.S., but it's not so dissimilar. Any lessons you take?
I think it's early for lessons. I'm looking forward to Kamala Harris's speech. I'm sort of digesting some of the stats that we've all seen with respect to voter turnout and who voted for whom. But I mean, it's quite a time, right? We're all processing these results and results from other elections around the world, and I'm going to stay focused on Milton because that's my job. My job is to defend Canadian interests, promote our exports and our innovation and all the opportunities that exist here in Canada. I'm also really, really confident that this government is capable of promoting and defending Canada's interests. Did a good job between 16 and 20. If anybody is interested or excited about renegotiating CUSMA or NAFTA 2.0 or however you'd like to refer to it, if those sentiments are coming from the United States, I think that only suggests that they weren't happy with the deal they got the first time, and I think we got a pretty good one.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Some people say that it might be a sneak peek of what's going to happen in Canada. What's your reaction to that?
I have no reaction to that.
Do you think it's time for the Liberals to stop criticizing Poilievre?
What do you make of the fact that, the Democrats changed their leader and they couldn't win? So what does it say about some of your colleagues that would like to change leader?
I haven't analyzed any of that. I think it's like a little bit of a step. We have our own challenges and our own issues. We have in Canada, we have our own opportunities, and we've also demonstrated an ability to cut interest rates more quickly. Our inflation has gotten down to a lower spot. Our job numbers are pretty good. I had an interview this week on the radio about economic optimism. I think it takes time. It's not as though inflation comes down and immediately everybody feels better, right? We're still remembering the fact that okay, but lettuce was $4.99 a month ago. That's too expensive. When are prices going to normalize? And I think we can't just constantly be saying, don't worry, your wages have kept pace with the rate of inflation. That doesn't really mean anything to your average Canadian, particularly if they haven't experienced a raise in the last 6 or 12 months. So stats are important, facts are important, but so are how people feel. And I'm trying to meet my constituents where they are and identify solutions that are unique, perhaps, to Milton's community. We're one of the fastest growing communities in Ontario, so, a lot of people have housing concerns, a lot of people have job concerns with respect to, the assumption that everybody that's going to live in the GTA is going to commute into Mississauga or Toronto to work. So I want to build up the economy. I got involved in politics because, I was raised in public housing in a co-op in Oakville. And back in the 90s, various governments in Canada decided to stop building community housing. We don't have a lot of community housing. There's not very much nonprofit housing in Canada. And the reason is because governments in the 90s decided not to invest there. And this is the first government in 30 years that has put co-ops back into a budget. And we've seen $1.5 billion of investment in new co-ops. The reason I'm so ardent about co-ops is my mom's worked in the industry, in the sector, and I grew up in a co-op myself. My mom retired on Sunday after 26 years running the same co-op in Mississauga. And the people that I talked to at her retirement party, I talked to 10 who all, in the last 10 years or so, left the co-op and bought a house. And, you know, I didn't stop because I wanted to get super political, but I did a speech about co-ops once, and the Conservatives called it Soviet-style housing. I didn't grow up in Soviet-style housing. My mom escaped Soviet Hungary in the 50s. We grew up in safe, affordable housing, and I'm going to keep doing this work so that we build more safe community housing that people can afford so they can save up and buy a home.
Speaking about housing, did you hear from your constituents about Mr. Poilievre's proposal on the housing? What have you heard from your constituents?
I haven't chatted with them too much about it. Like, my concern is that if I'm in favor of lower taxes, but it's a question of how you pay for it. And the Housing Accelerator Fund has benefited Milton to the tune of $22 million. It's going to enable housing people to find solutions. That's in the non-market space, that's in the affordable space, in the supportive space, on the shelter side. It's going to help. And if we're going to, you know, subsidize $1 million condos by cutting taxes cutting taxes, but then paying for it by taking away from social programs that are supporting the most vulnerable, I don't think that's the way to build communities. Thanks, guys.
Thoughts about how your colleagues are going to handle the immigration file now that Trump's president?
Look, I'll leave it to Mark to do his job. Sorry for the sun here. Yeah, look, I think we've been planning for a number of months for whatever inevitability may arise from the American election. But of course, our interests of Canadians is what's going to determine the path forward. There's obviously different policy decisions that will be taken by foreign governments of different partisan persuasions, and those can have an impact. But my sense is, by collaborating with the American administration to ensure that we can continue to have an open trading relationship, we can communicate that it's in our collective interest to manage the border appropriately, but at the same time embrace cross-border trade. But when it comes to the specifics on the immigration portfolio, I've got a colleague who's got things well in hand. Listen, thanks, folks.
Look, I will say that what's really important is that the world continues to stand with Ukraine. And I know that the Ukrainians are not only fighting for their own freedom and democracy and for their own survival, but they're also fighting for us. If Russia wins, then they won't stop at Ukraine. Vladimir Putin won't stop at Ukraine. And it'll be Canadians, Americans, and Europeans will be next in defending ourselves against Russian aggression. So we need to continue to support Ukraine with everything that they need to win this war, and we'll continue to work with our allies to make sure that happens.
But if Trump doesn't, support this effort going forward, what will that mean for the war?
Well, I don't want to speculate as to what President-elect Trump will decide to do, but it is in the interest of Canada, the United States, and Europe, and the entire democratic world that Ukraine win this war. And my hope will be that that the United States continues to support Ukraine, together with Canada and our European allies until they win. That's my hope. Thank you.